Three, two, one. Hello, everybody. Welcome to 420 Live. I'm Jeff Kravitz, your host with the most, coming to you live 4:20 p.m. Pacific time. But as you know, 420 is a state of mind. So it's 420 wherever you are. And I'm glad you are wherever you are. I hope you're healthy. I hope you're safe. I hope you've been getting outside and enjoying what's left of summer. I was down the beach today. It was getting a wee bit nippy. I could feel the change of seasons coming. And usually you have some dog days in August, but the next 10 days look mild. And we had Fish was supposed to be in Atlantic City this weekend. And I got to tell you, folks, we kind of dodged a little bullet just because the weather was dubious. You know, it was wet. It was cool. It would have been fine. We would have survived. I don't think it would have gotten rained out. It wasn't that bad. But it was just, a northeaster blew in, and they're 3 days. 3 days for a northeaster, and one last weekend and one this weekend. So this past weekend. So 2 weekends in a row with the northeaster blowing in. All my lifeguard training, my 10 years on the Atlantic City Beach Patrol coming in handy when it comes to looking at the weather. Today I walked down, I'm like, southerly breeze. Be a little bit cool, but brings the warm water in, so easier to swim and easier to get out there in the ocean. But when you come out, it's a little bit cooler. And you could feel it at night now, dip it down into the 60s here. I saw my friend, I have some friends, the wine stocks are up in Great Barrington, and I saw up there, it's dipping down into the 40s and 50s, the high 40s, low 50s at night. And, when I left LA in June, first of all, I didn't think I'd be here this long. I'm now going on over a month. June, I think, what is it today? The 17th. Yeah, about a month. And I've been here 4 weeks that I've been tooling around the East Coast. Last week, I got back from the Chesapeake. Amazing trip. The whole area. I just never spent enough time. I never had time to go adventure and to see what's out there. But, this show has been my refuge. I appreciate everybody tuning in and coming in and being with us, and getting a chance to show people some of what the people that have influenced my life and been a part of the grand party that I've been photographing for years that has tragically come crashing to an end, at least temporarily. I did see my first live music this weekend in 5.5 months. I saw my first live music with psychedelics this weekend, which was the first time in probably since I think maybe Fish in Mexico. So it was a revelation. It was a Dead cover band called Dead Reckoning. It was out in Egg Harbor Township, out in the great EHT at a golf course. It was on a patio. It was, somewhere I didn't think I'd last for 4 hours, but you know what? The music was so great to have live music. And the band threw some zingers in there that I like. I heard Odessa, which I've never heard live. And they played great versions of some really old classics and chestnuts. And it was just great to dance and get my yayas out and feel a little bit of that 25 coursing through my veins, and being able to remember what it was like when we could go to music and consume it. And I really feel, with nobody willing to take the chance, I will say Jeff Gordon and Ike Richmond and our friends out there at Live Nation Philadelphia, congratulations for putting on the show this past weekend with Bert Kreischer. I know Friday night we have Pigeons playing ping pong out in the parking lot of the Philly Citizen Bank Stadium, and you could get a ticket and bring your car and drive in and pack your cooler. And this is the new paradigm now for how you're going to be seeing music. If you saw the thing in England last week, that's a new fairgrounds that they've set up where they're going to be having concerts, and everybody's going to be sitting in those little steel boxes. So there is going to be music. It is going to be awkward. And even at the bar this night, you had to have a table. And if you weren't at the table, it was kind of like, people were kind of dancing around, but put your masks on, pull your masks up. And, there was some wise ass yelling, COVID's over. You tell two friends and they'll tell two friends and they'll tell two friends, like Breck Shampoo. Spread it around. COVID's over. But we know it's not over. It's still happening. And we have to proceed with caution. And you have to proceed with what your comfortable level is. And Temke, all I got to say, I would have taken I saw the band Friday night at someone's house in the backyard at a party that I went to. So I knew they were playing. They said we're playing tomorrow night on Saturday at this country club, or it wasn't even a country club. It was just a bar at the edge of a golf course. And and it's a small little bar too. It wasn't big. There are probably 50 people there. But once I heard they were playing and I could see a full 4 hours of music, I was like, okay, let's load up. Speaking of loading up, our guest today, Mike Dillon. Since I was a wee lad at the early Bonnaroos, I'd see Mike Dillon up there pounding away on something and really adding a lot of texture. Myself being a huge Zappa fan, and back in the day, Lionel Hampton was someone that I always would fascinate me with what he was able to pull out. And a funny thing was, it's the first time Lionel Hampton popped into my head was right now when I said his name. But Mike Dillon is a percussionist we've all seen around the scene, and he has a new record out, and we're going to bring him in and say hi to Mike Dillon. Hello, Mike.
Hey, Jeff. Nice to see you.
Good to see you. How you doing?
I'm good.
Oh, is he your pandemic pup, or you've had the pup for a while?
Well, he's 11-year-old Papillon. I haven't had him for 11 years. My wife has had him. I got married a couple years back, and this came with the marriage. But since I've been off the road, I've become good pals with him.
You're very tight, right?
Yeah.
For a while, you probably didn't know who the hell you were. Every time you walked in, you're like, who's this guy?
Who is this guy? He's gone all the time.
But where you at? What was the longest period you were home before you went off?
I would say I can't even remember the last time I ever had a month straight at home. Like last October, what would that be? 2018. I was in New Orleans for 2 months straight, making a record with Ricky Lee, but still with Ricky Lee Jones, but still flying out and doing, gigs on the weekend. So, that was nice, but that was like the longest sort of being at home period ever. But then this thing hit. We just finished up an epic like December 26th till March 8th tour. And Galactic was supposed to, I'm up in Kansas City right now. They were going to come here and play a show. And we were talking about it. And then I got a text from Robert saying, no gig, the whole tour's been canceled, and it's funny on that last tour, like we're out in the West Coast, we heard South by Southwest got canceled. We're in the van and me and my pals and my band, we're going, well, I guess it's smart they're canceling everything now. Jazz Fest will be back. We'll be done with COVID by, April. Maybe French Quarter Fest will happen. Like not even a clue. Couldn't even grasp it, And I remember things were getting rebooked. Stuff in April was getting rebooked for like June and July. So, but I've used the time to really just go in the studio a lot and record. I've got 3 new records recorded since I've been off the road. And
wow.
All
original material?
All original material. And like one of it's sort of an acoustic, like really almost like my version of a Leonard Cohen kind of record, just like, but with vibes, like my kind of vocals I do. And then the other one is like crazy stuff, 2 other crazy like 21 songs. Just insane stuff. Like one of my buddies, he plays with all the Zappa guys, and he played with Sean Lennon. He lives in New York, so like everyone's at home. So you're just like, hey, here's the song. So it's like it's really been cool putting together music. Like one of the drummers lives in Berlin, another guy in LA, and everybody has really good studios. Because just like with business, a lot of places have been moving towards like my buddy Matt Chamberlain plays with me in Critters Buggin'. He has an amazing studio. And with the record industry changing, so many producers would be like, can you do it at your home studio? We don't have the budget, or we're just too lazy to drive from Malibu to LA. We don't want to deal with traffic. So they were already moving towards remote recording, And so, it's really been fun. And having time to like actually, instead of like, all right, we got 3 days to make a record, it's nice. It's like, all right, I've been working on records for 5.5 months straight now.
And we don't have the budget restrictions. And you have the access to musicians that is unparalleled because everybody's sitting around on their ass. Well, most people are sitting around on their ass.
Yeah, I got Bob Dylan's drummer. I got the JP from Clutch, my buddy Earl Harvin, he played with Seal. Stanton has sent me tracks. It's incredible. mean, it helps that I know a lot of these people, but you know, my buddy Nick, who plays in Cage the Elephant, sent me a guitar track, and then my guys in my band, you know, and different people. So Steve Bernstein sent me some trumpet. I'm excited about it. I'm like, hey, Calibro, can I put it out next week? He's like, you have a new record out. You must take this record.
All right, well,
I'm very excited about this record.
That's a good segue. So let's talk about the new record. I listened to it last night, and you know, it's just so interesting that it's all percussion. That I don't know if I remember hearing some. Maybe Mickey Hart back in the day was doing stuff all percussion like that, but to hear a full vibe and marimba, and how many toys did you use on this thing?
I don't know if you can see my little studio. I'll try to do it without messing everything up. But like in the back's the bass marimba. There's the marimba. There's the vibes, the timpani, the chimes. Behind here is a little xylophone.
So you recorded everything live there? Is it all live, or do you record tracks? How does it work when you're?
Yeah, there's a great studio here in town, an engineer I've been working with and producer, my friend Chad Mize. We've been working together since the 90s. And he's like just an old vintage, like analog. I don't want to use the word nerd. He's not a nerd at all. But like, he's like, that right there, Frank Sinatra had in his studio. And that right there, Henry Mancini kept one everywhere he went. Like, I'm like, that's incredible. You know, studio guys know stuff like that, like the way we know about like when you said percussion records, I was like, well, you know, Max Roach did it with M Boom. He would he'd have like a percussion orchestra, but would play songs like and have timpani and marimbas doing the bass parts. And, you know, had congas and all kinds of stuff. So I got really into like collecting classical music back when I was music instruments when I was playing with Les, when I was touring with him with the Frog Brigade. You mentioned Bonnaroo. Mm-hmm. You know, like just yesterday we were playing to 45,000 people with, you know, I remember Les going, yeah, the tour manager going, yeah, we're doing this thing called Bonnaroo next week. Like we didn't know, we were just on tour. Oh, really? Yeah, it's going to be awesome. It's going to be a cool festival. And you're showing up and like driving in, people going, getting the calls, like our tour manager going, dude, it's taking people like a day to get in. It's insane. And it was really exciting. But so anyway, I just started collecting these instruments. And then I was like, well, you know what? I want to just make records with nothing but my percussion instruments. And this is my third one. And just like with anything else, you get a little better at it. And I would say the first time back, my first solo record, which was mostly all percussion, but I still relied on a lot of other musicians. Like, all right, I need a bass player here or a sax player. This isn't interesting enough with just all percussion, mainly me playing it. But this one, besides my buddy Earl Harvin on drums, it was pretty much, I did it all. And I would start, say, like, if I had a marimba idea, I'd lay down the marimba first. And then I'd be like, all right, that sounds good. Let's put the timpani on. Let's put a vibraphone on. All right, let's put some tabla. You know, there's Zakir Hussain is the master of tabla, who played on a lot of the Mickey Hart stuff.
Yes.
You know, and then so we just layered it, you know, and then once again, it was like sort of the same deal as this pandemic. I had was hanging out up here with Peregrine at her house in Kansas City. When I'm in New Orleans, all you do is play music, even if it's not Jazz Fest. It's just, you know how it is.
There's always a gig.
I mean, I when I was home in New Orleans, I would sometimes be 2 gigs a day in October. You'd be like, wow, I don't know what's more busy. Like Stanton and I joke about it. He'll be like, yeah, dude, I'm on tour. I got time to practice. You know, he drum set on tour with him, sets it up backstage. So when I was here, I was like, well, there's not that many gigs. It's a different scene. So I was just like, at first, like, what am I going to do? And I just had like one instrument at her place, this old church. And the songs just started writing themselves, coming out of the walls. It was literally like, this is so much fun. And then I was like, wow, I got 3 new songs. I need to record them. So I texted Chad and then.
So when you're writing, are you just playing and you just like fucking around like with your instrument and playing different progressions, and then you fall into a groove, and then you're like, oh, this is really good, and then you have to kind of, do you write it down at that point, or do you record it, or are you recording the whole time you're jamming?
Yeah, sometimes I record it. A lot of times I just remember it. If it's good, it sticks in my head. And I'm like, wow, I like that idea. And I might leave. And because part of my process is like, well, if I forget about it, it probably sucked anyway. So,
So it has to stick in your head long enough for when you get back to the marimba, you remember it.
Coffee addict these days. That's my drug of choice.
Yeah, I drink a lot of coffee too.
I had a 4 shot, so I'd be good and ready for you. But go get some more coffee and come back and work on it. But the phones, a lot of times though, it'd literally be like, ooh, I like that idea. So I'd start my garage bands, get started with an idea, flesh it out, and just save it, and then be like, listen to it and go, all right, when I get back, I'm going to record this song. So there's, it's either just like you remember it or you flesh it out and it becomes something.
Yeah.
Every now and then I write it out, but that's like a pain in the ass.
So hold on. I just want to tell the audience, yes, Mike is going to play, but not yet. Okay. We have a little conversation yet. So you gotta wait for the good stuff. We're going to he's going to get behind there and play some music for you, Jim. So don't worry. So how do you take this on the road is my question. When you can finally go on the road?
Well, Earl and I, we would go out and tour as duos, and we just load the van with tons of percussion, and we'd cover a lot of ground as a duo. There's some YouTube. I should have sent you one of them. There's some YouTubes of us out there doing it. And then I had this 25-person percussion ensemble that I've only done performances in New Orleans. But I was literally, for this record, going to like get a grant and, talk to some different arts things and try to get a tour bus and tell everyone like, all right, there's no money, but we got a tour bus and a trailer full of percussion. Let's go to the country. And I talked to Kevin about it. It was like my dream, take a percussion ensemble on the road, like rock and roll style,
I love it, but not now.
And I still want to do that. Like, I don't know when we're going to get back to that, but then it was like, well, maybe I'll just take out. I did one tour with Jim from Mo. We all, Jimmy.
Yeah.
Lachlan and my buddy Otto. And speaking of Zappa, Ed Mann, great, he was the music director for Zappa and my good friend. The 4 of us did some playing, and that was really amazing. Just 4 people. So at some point, I'm going to get out and tour this record. But until then, it's just these live streams. And we've done the same thing. We've set up outside and played a few gigs for our friends. I don't know if I want to get inside a club yet with people.
No, I don't think so either.
Yeah, everyone starts making out with each other, getting drunk. And you're like, put your mask on. Don't talk.
Well, people were making out with their masks on the other night when I was out. No, yeah. I'm only kidding. I really wasn't happening.
We played one show July 4th. I drove down to New Orleans, and it was an outdoor show, and there was only about 50 people. It was pretty much a private event. Outdoors is my band, the Iceman Special, and everyone was really good. They were coming up to me going, Mr. Dillon, we're wearing masks because we heard if we didn't, you wouldn't play. So all these younger folks.
Well, good.
And they were good about it, but once the drinking and, the hallucinogens and the different, ecstasy or whatever the kids are doing these days at the shows, I could tell, like, as the night wore on, the masks started disappearing and people just want to dance close to it, and they're all young. If they get it, most of them are going to be okay. But I felt weird going, okay, it's not time yet to be doing, like, regular shows, This was pretty much a private party.
And I agree. I think the problem is that a lot of people are tied up with the man. They're just you can't get over it in your head. We don't have good leadership from the top. It's creating an issue where nobody can answer any questions or answer any questions, and it just creates a lot of problems. Unfortunately. But what I think there is a good flip side to this, where someone that like you that's been on the road for so long has a chance to center themselves and be even more creative. It creates a huge opportunity too.
Yeah, it really does. I mean, I've been thinking about this all the years. I put 200 dates, 250 days on the road, that kind of energy. It's like now I literally, because my good buddy Chad has a studio, same deal. No one has money to go in the studio. So he's basically like, all right, let's make music, everyone's unemployed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a wonderful opportunity to focus on studio. That's why people like Prince or people that are able to be in the studio all the time get really good at it, besides being geniuses. So, it's like anything else. You may not be the next Picasso, but if you paint every day, you're going to be a lot better than you were a year ago. So that's my motto.
So I know we were supposed to talk last week. You had a session. You want to talk about what you were doing?
Yeah, Ricky Lee Jones, Chucky's in Love. For those of y'all who don't know her, for me, I was 15.
I know her.
I saw her on Saturday Night Live my first time. And I was like, whoa, who's the cool lady? I'm sure I said chick, but, that's 1979 or 80. I was in junior high with the beret, and she's got a killing band. I was already playing drums. And then I started playing with her probably in 2016. But she texted me. We were going to videotape for like last weekend or do a live stream. She had done one live stream with me, and then she decided she didn't like the quality of just the phone, and she wanted to make it a little higher quality. So she recorded with James Singleton and this New Orleans guitar player, Matt Hempsey. We just recorded like 2.5 hours of music, like a bunch of her songs. She's a great jazz singer.
So were you all in the studio? Was that what happened? You're all or?
It was actually like in a New Orleans space. It was just a video, and they recorded it, good quality. But it's for a lot.
All of you in the same room.
Yeah, a place like the size of this, like this.
Right. A nice big wide room, and you got your whole performance down with her, and then they're going to use it later. Or did they do it live?
We did it, just recorded it live, and she's going to broadcast either this week coming up or next week. But she, that's how they're doing it.
Wow. Well, it must have been a lot of fun to play, huh?
Yeah, I've been making, that's one thing I have done is like, as far as the live thing is get James Singleton, great New Orleans bass player.
Oh yeah, sure.
I love James, I've gone down and done a couple of live streams with him, and he's come up here and played with me up here. And there's a great bebop drummer, this cat named Arnie Young, who lives up here. He's 76. It's like Johnny V, like guys that are in their 70s, they just feel music differently than people like me in my 50s or even younger kids, because, they came up like all the rock and roll had that swing. Like Earl Palmer was the king of rock and roll, and, it wasn't like, Elvin Jones was like the kid or whatever.
Right.
So they just have a feel that most young drummers don't have. So I'm glad there's still some 70-year-old drummers around that we can play with.
And do you don't think you lose your timing as you get older?
I think if you don't practice, you definitely lose your timing. I've played with some older drummers, and I play with myself. If I don't practice with a metronome, you can get a little wide. I take tabla lessons still. I have a great teacher, and he kicks my ass every other week, just like this. We do it on the FaceTime with my computer. And even through the computer, he'll be like, nope, you rushed one beat right there. So, yeah, it's awesome. He's a Bengali tabla player. He lives in Los Angeles. He taught Danny Carey, the drummer from Tool. And
right.
He's a great musician. He's 69. Same thing, with all these older guys, you're just hoping they stay healthy and they don't get the COVID, man.
Yeah, well, that's for sure. I hope none of us get it. What were your influences growing up?
Well, I love Zappa, like you're talking about. I remember listening to Joe's Garage all the time.
It was really rare to hear vibes in a rock band when we were growing up.
It really was. But I remember somehow I got Joe's Garage. I was a Rush fan, Led Zeppelin, any kid who was born in 65 and came of age in the late 70s, and all the original prog rock stuff. And then I discovered punk rock. But I also played in the Houston Youth Symphony, and got to play Stravinsky when I was a senior in high school.
And were you always on percussion? Was that always your thing?
Yeah, always percussion.
And when did you hit the vibes? When did you start using mallets?
So like if you're a high school drummer, you had to play marimba in school band. So like in school band and orchestra, I always ended up playing mallets, and I actually liked it. I would learn classical pieces. And then when I went to North Texas State University to study percussion, and I was going to get a big jazz gig and be a famous drummer, but I would always be, well, if you're not good enough on drums, why don't you go try percussion? And I was actually studying percussion, and that way with drumline and a drum corps too. Thought I'd make snare line. I would always get thrown in the pit to play mallets. So I was always sort of shifted towards mallets. And I bought a set of vibes, and I wasn't that good at jazz, that word jazz, but I was pretty good classical player, and I could read pretty well. And then one day I was just like, you know what? I'm going to learn how to improvise. I had this block in my head. I'd seen the Thelonious Monk movie, and that was the mid-'90s. And at that point, I was mainly concentrating on hand percussion, congas, bongos, and playing in bands doing that. And I started playing my old vibraphone again. And the next thing I know, I started playing it in my band, and then like just getting into it and started learning things. You know, I loved Lionel Hampton, Tito Puente, Milt Jackson. Those are some of the giants, you know. And then like, you know, I realized like Ruth Underwood and Ed Mann, and even like I think
Ruth was with Zappa's band, right?
Yeah, Ruth and Ed were both with Zappa's band. And then that instrumental band that Phil Collins was in that we all listened to, I think it was called Band X or Brand X.
Oh yeah, Brand X. Well, they were great.
They were awesome. They had a mouth.
Was there vibes in Brand X?
What's that?
Was there vibes in Brand X?
Yep, there was vibes in Brand X.
Wow.
So there was that, and then you know Tortoise came along later, and I started hearing them, and by that time, you know, it was also a desire to write music, because as a drummer, you're playing all rhythm, and it was just like, well, I can write music on the vibes. So I started writing on the vibes and playing in groups, and the next thing you know, I was, you know, the first like big gig I got on the vibes was with Les through Scarrick. You know, went and hung out, and we were somehow opening for the Frog Brigade, one of these weird bands I was in. The next thing I know, I sat in with Les, and he was like, yeah, I got a xylophone at my studio. And then like I went out there and recorded that Purple Onion with him. And, you know, it's just been a nice little process. It's like, wow, all of a sudden I'm 55. Happened.
55, what a life, huh?
55
next week?
In September 15th.
Oh, September. Oh, happy almost birthday. Nice surviving. We have a lot of similar musical influence. I could just hear by what you're listing and who you're listing that we both kind of came of age at the amazing age of rock and roll. We watched rock and roll kind of, you know, arena rock really started in the 70s, right?
Totally. You know, and I was checking out your Instagram today, and, you know, you had a lot of cool pictures of the Dead, and you talked about, like, you know, for Jerry's birthday, his influence on you. And, you know, I remember the 80s and 80s music, you know, like the Dead in this weird sort of way was the same way like punk rock was. You know, you had all this mainstream stuff. Like I remember pre-Nirvana, what your music choices were. And I had so many friends that were Deadheads. Like
and then there was Poison and Rat and
you know, like Guns N' Roses was considered edgy, you know.
Yeah.
And,
well, it was the MTV generation, right? Combining with FM radio in those early 80s.
Yeah.
And the Dead was a cult band, and then punk came out of England, and then Seattle exploded. And Seattle, I remember Guns N' Roses and that Nirvana record that for coming out around, I think, well, Guns N' Roses was a little bit earlier, I think, right? Probably the 80s.
Yeah, Nirvana just knocked Guns N' Roses and Michael Jackson and everybody off. It was just like that. Like I knew about Nirvana, and then all of a sudden, boom, they were just like, they had taken over, and there's this whole new musical revolution that was pretty exciting. But, you know, the Dead thing, now that I think about it, like the live music scene, like always through my career, there were always Deadheads that would show up at our shows. You know, I was good friends with Edie Brickell and the New Bohemians, that crew. And I remember when they got to go out and open, they were all deadheads. And when they got to open for the Dead at RFK, they were like, woo! You know, and I was like, how was it? They were like, well, we went on at 6:30. Most people were still out in the parking lot, but it was awesome. You know?
It's got to be hard to play to an empty house. All right, well, let's give the kids what they want. Why don't you give us a song there, Mike?
All right, I'm going to play my version. Can you see that vibraphone okay?
Yeah, and I'm going to tune out here and just let you do your thing. So you go to it, and I'll come back on when you're done.
Nice talking to you, Jeff. How's this look?
You look great. You're right in the middle.
All right, cool.
There you go. All yours, Mike. Wowza. That was beautiful.
Thanks, Jeff.
It sounded so great. So you were running that through an amp, right?
Yeah, I got it going through pedals.
Oh,
and,
yeah.
You know, a nice little Moog delay pedal. It gives it that.
You could do this by yourself. You don't need anyone else. You could take that shit on the road. You could stand 25 feet away from people, be the only guy in the band.
Okay, I'm going to give you my secret. I bought an old Airstream that I've been fixing up, and I'm getting it back, I think, pretty soon. So I'm just going to jump in the Airstream, put it on the back of my van, and just drive to people's houses and play in their front lawn with the vibes. By request. I'm coming to your town. Book
by
me
request, and by cash, too.
Yeah, and have my money.
In a brown paper bag.
That's right.
So how did you come to pick that? That's your only cover on the record, right?
Well, I also did a Elliot Smith cover, a couple of his. I'm sort of an Elliot Smith. I started learning his songs. Same deal as Johnny Cash's version of that song. I was like, wow, I wonder what Elliot Smith would sound like on the Vibes. Function and Broke, I did pretty much a bunch of Elliot Smith songs. So I did just 2 on Rosewood. But I like the way his songwriting lends itself to vibes. And, you know, I'd read that Miles Davis autobiography or biography. I don't know which one it was. But,
yeah.
You know, he talked about how, as an instrumentalist, how much he was into Frank Sinatra and just becoming lyrical. So I started learning like these songs just to become a more lyrical vibraphonist, you know, not just like always like playing crazy fast stuff. So what started off as an exercise in trying to become more lyrical became like, oh, wow, that sounds pretty cool. And I would do it and people would like it. And
is that a problem a lot of musicians have where they're going to school and they're just trying to play everything as fast and get as many notes in there as possible, and they don't understand that that's kind of not what it's all about at a certain point? I mean, is there a learning curve for that, or is that something you realize early on?
Totally. I mean, as a youngster, you're like, I mean, I grew up in the first wave of fusion, like Mahavishnu Orchestra and like
Return to Forever,
and just like Weather Report, Dixie Drex, all that stuff. And every drummer was incredible, and you wanted your jaw to go to the ground.
right?
So, and a lot of those drummers did that to us. So
well, not just the drummers, the whole band, the guitar players, Al Di Meola,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, John McLaughlin. I mean, all these guys. Right.
And it was like this shredding thing. And then all of a sudden one day I'm like, wow. Like I didn't get like say Merle Haggard or Willie Nelson when I was back then. But then like now it's like I'm more inclined to listen to a Waylon Jennings record or an old Hank Williams record than my Return to Forever. I still have my Return to Forever records, but I don't listen to them as much as, you know, I don't know. I think it's a taste thing. And yeah, as you age, you realize like, okay, maybe I'll learn how to like say something with one note that really moves someone, you know. Like Miles Davis was so badass. He could just play one note and you'd be like, he wins.
Well, and also when you want to affect your songwriting or influence your songwriting, it's really hard when in the shred world. But when you listen to guys that were really, like you said, with Sinatra, lyrical, I mean, that's a really great way to put it, is that they're thinking more in these phrases, these musical phrases, than they are in trying to just show everybody how proficient they are at their instrument.
Yeah, and at the end of the day, it all comes down to songwriting. I mean, you know, Back to the Dead, like I think the reason they're the biggest jam band ever, besides starting it, for what they were doing, they wrote great timeless songs. I remember Keller Wood, you know, I know that I saw the Dead with Jerry once, you know. You
weren't a Deadhead growing up?
I wasn't a Deadhead. I thought they were cool. You know, I thought the drummers were really cool, but it was just like, you know, I was into prog rock and like shredding, and then I discovered punk rock. But like one day, I was sitting with Keller Williams. He was like, hey man, here's some songs I'm doing. And on there was like Eyes of the World. And I remember texting going, hey man, you write this song, Eyes of the World? It's really great. He's like, no, Mike, that's Grateful Dead. You know, so like I learned a bunch of Dead songs playing with Keller. And I was like, wow, these are friggin' great songs, you know? Like at the end of the day, they're great songs. And there's a reason why everyone covered them and played tribute to them. So,
well, yeah, the songwriting is interesting, and you bring up an interesting question about being a sideman now, because you've been a sideman for a lot of different people. Who are some of your favorites?
Well, that's what I like my position as a sideman, because as long as I've been a sideman, but I've also been doing my projects forever too. So right. Not only does it help me understand the band leader, you know, having led bands myself, I can be a sideman. So I'm not like being the sideman and trying to go like, all right, I know how to run the band better than you do. When I be a sideman, I'm like, yes, I get to be full on sideman right now, and I'll go back to doing my own thing soon enough. So I always use the sideman thing as a way to learn about the way other people do things. Being a fairly decent percussionist, I always got hired to play on records, but I had a punk funk band back in the 90s called Billy Goat that had a record deal and toured. So I never did anything but do my own music. And then when that ended, that's when I segued to about around 2000 and started doing more of the Sidemen stuff. And of course, the first Sidemen gig was with Les. But I didn't audition.
That was Frog Brigade? Frog Brigade?
Frog Brigade, you know, and I mean, I learned so much from Les. Like, he was a shredder, but you know what made him and Primus stick out? It's his friggin' songwriting, you know? He's like the prog, thrash metal jam Tom Waits, you know? No one writes music like Les, and he's amazing, you know? He gets compared to Beefheart or Zappa, but I don't know. He's, you know, to me, he's more of a songwriter, like way Tom is or whatever. And I learned a lot from him and his concept. Just even about just being super positive on the road. He was always like happy guy on the bus, and you come out and he'd keep you laughing all the time. Les is an extremely hilarious dude. And then like from that, I jumped to touring with Ani DiFranco. And it was a completely different world than the jam band scene. It was like, I remember being terrified the first gig. I was like one of two men in the building, and they were the other two men were like
security.
The band, you know what I mean? So like I had heard this thing like, oh yeah, you're playing with Ani DiFranco. It's, you know, they don't like men on that tour. You're in trouble. And I remember being literally scared, like, what are they talking about?
The girls are gonna beat me up.
You know, it's like, you know, it's a down with men fest, you know, and that's just complete stupidity. It was the most beautiful crowd, and I learned a whole nother songwriting thing with her. I mean, like her activism, and then her broken heart songs, and then she discovered love. She fell in love with her husband, who she's still with, an old friend of mine. And so she was transitioning from writing songs about this guy did me wrong to like, I'm in love and I got to learn how to write a love song. So it was really cool seeing her process with that. And then I would say the next side gig after that, you know, I'd go back and forth with Les, did the Primus thing for him when he did the Chocolate Factory.
I remember that tour.
That was really fun. And then Ricky Lee Jones, that just came out of nowhere. She was living in New Orleans, still does. She came and saw me play with James Singleton. And then she called me one day when I was on tour. I was like, hey, do you want to go on tour with me, Mike? I'm like, I love you, Ricky. When? Next week. I'm like, I'm booked for 6 months. You're crazy. So I figured out a week time frame, and we had such a blast. And she took me to Europe with her 2 months later. I flew right from summer camp to Europe. And that started my thing with Ricky. And talking about learning about songwriting, hearing about, you know, her firsthand, her and Tom Waits being like in their 20s, living in Los Angeles, the whole troubadour singer-songwriter scene that was happening in the late 70s. I mean, I still can't believe some of the stories I've heard about Charles Bukowski calling her house. Hey, is Tom there? No, who's this? It's Bukowski. Tell him to call me. Or whatever, you know. You know, but hearing about not only being a fan, I'm such a fan of music still. I've never lost my love of music. Like when I go on a drive for 10 hours, I listen to music the whole way because I love music still. So hearing about her talking about the way they wrote songs and they were hypercritical of each other, and it was just about getting better. Hearing her talk about Lowell George coming over and her playing Easy Money. I guess he heard her version of Easy Money, and then he recorded it, and it helped her get a record deal. And then when Mac, you know, and then like Dr. John, you know, she met Mac on Hollywood or Sunset, and then they ended up playing music. Just hearing about like these encounters at the late 70s with, you know, these icons of music. And I mean, with Ricky, it goes on and on and on. There's always a new story. So
I'm sure. And she's still making stories, which is incredible.
Yeah, you know, and I helped produce this last record she put out. And watching her sing like a real singer, like do 35 tracks of one song.
Wow.
And like the first one made everyone in the room cry. It was incredible. And she comes in and goes, no, that's not very good. That was flat and that was flat. And her ear's so fine-tuned. And she just kept pushing deeper and deeper to find like a really exemplary track.
And she still had a voice after 35 takes. That's incredible.
Yeah, I mean, she wouldn't do them all in one day, but over a course of 2 months, she just kept trying to like get better and better takes, and she knew exactly what she's going for. And I said, did y'all work this hard when you're in your 20s, like when you are making records? She's like, oh my God, way more, And she had like Steve Gadd and Chuck Rainey, like the top musicians on the planet, Lenny Waronker producing it, Russ Titleman.
Crazy.
And they focused on making a record for a year. And that's something we don't get to do anymore because there aren't record companies that say, here's $1 million to go make a record. Unless you're like one of the few I don't know. Some people get that, but for the most part, everyone gets $5,000 to go make a record.
Here's $5,000. And like you said, nowadays you could even hold on to most of that by just hiring guys that are at home to lay a couple tracks for you.
Hey man, I'll throw you $100. You want to play some guitar? Got my unemployment, bro.
One of the questions was about your working with Norwood from Fishbone.
Okay, now those are like what I just talked about was like sort of what I consider sideman gigs, but
right.
Every one of those persons, I don't really consider them a sideman as much as like we became friends. So I'm like, right. And they were all people, like I've never done a gig of music that I don't like. Like that's the thing I'm most blessed about. Because a lot of sidemen have to do some gigs of music they don't particularly like. So I've been only work with artists I like. And then Norwood, okay, Fishbone was like our kings. Like in the late 80s when I discovered them, there was Fishbone, Chili Peppers, Bad Brains, Minutemen, all these cool bands that we loved. But Fishbone to me was just like, and even Les says it, when they were at their peak, no one could touch Fishbone. They were all doing backflips off the stage, full horn section. Angelo was out of his mind. They were like our kings. And then one day back in 2014, I was like, hey, Norwood, do you want to go on tour with me and play my weird music? And he was like, hell yeah, let's do it. And I met him through Les. He would come hang out backstage whenever we were in LA playing shows. And same deal. Like when you're hanging out with Norwood on a van talk, you get to hear him talk about like Los Angeles music history. And he has a really unique perspective of growing up in Compton and being friends with Flea and like seeing the beginning of hip hop, knowing Joe Bass and all the funk dudes. And then like the punk rock scene, being friends with Keith Morris and, the Circle Jerks. And I mean, he has an amazing perspective on music. I'm always like, when are you going to write your book? We will all read it.
He's a crazy man. And then you also did a soundtrack of a movie for a friend of mine, for Jeremiah Kent.
Jeremiah, we keep having all these friends. That was so much fun. He was like, hey, me and my friends, we took this trip where we went to India and we we rode our paddle boards down the Ganges River. I'm like, wait, stop. What did you do? Yeah. And we'd like you to score it. I heard you play tablas and you're sort of weird and I think it would be cool. And they sent me the footage and I got to say, I just got like James and Carly, who was playing trombone with me, and a few other great musicians. And we just sort of jammed out some things, tried to color it. A lot of my music is soundtrack oriented. So if you're a movie producer, movie placement editor, I'm available for work.
Yes.
Norwood's always like, man, Mike, your stuff is cut out for movies. I'm like, I agree. So hire me.
The musical supervisor is the guy you want to talk to, the musical supervisor, right?
Musical supervisors. Danny Elfman's not the only percussionist who makes weird soundtrack music. But so yeah, and I forgot about it completely. Not forgot about it, but then Kevin released at Royal Potato, released it digitally, the soundtrack, and a lot of people really reached out to me to tell me how much they enjoyed that soundtrack. And I mean, seeing those guys like get into that river. Have you watched it?
No, I didn't even know about it until Jeremiah hit me up today. I was like, oh, Mike soundtracked my record.
Yeah, I mean, they literally are at this giant festival. There's like 1 million people, like,
Just 1 million people.
Festival on the planet. There's literally 1 million people at this festival. They go to it. It's intense. They try to sneak into the river, and the policemen are like, no, no, no. So they just, walk up 5 miles upriver. And one of the first scenes is them waving at the policemen at the festival as they're going by on their, what they were calling their poop shit destroyers. Reference.
It's really disgusting, right? The Ganges.
Parts of it is beautiful, but they were fighting sickness, and there was one scene where there's a lot of trash in the river, like right by Varanasi. But trash.
Have you done other soundtracks, or was that the first one you did?
I've done a couple of others. I can't remember at the time. Some of my stuff has been used in TV shows.
Of course.
Like there's some Discovery Channel stuff where you're like, I got a little mailbox money, party time.
So what does the future hold? What do you got? What are you hoping is the best case scenario, and how would you handle slipping back into the stream?
Well, I hope that, I hope America's going through like this crazy time. I mean, I hope that we can finally heal some of these deep wounds. I mean, Dolly Parton said it best the other day. Did you see what she said?
Go ahead.
You saw what she said, right?
Right, but go ahead, tell everybody.
Someone goes, so do you think Black Lives Matter or whatever? She goes, of course Black Lives Matter. What do we think? Our little white asses are the only ones that matter? It's like, there's such division up top that people like can't see, like, hey, people are hurting and they matter. We're not talking about you right now. Like, so at the end of the day, like, I know I'm blessed, I'm alive, I'm gonna get to play music eventually. But I think that I hope that we right ourselves and that everyone's using this time as a learning period to, like, I've been blessed to play music mostly my whole career. I've been, played with Black musicians in all my bands. And as a musician, I've learned so much from Black music, from Black American music. We're all heavily indebted to it, So, like, just by playing music, there's never been any idea of white supremacy in my heart or any desire to ever feel any of that,
Right, but you got to admit that when you started to, not that we had to educate ourselves, but I had to educate myself when I started watching films like The 13th and stuff. There's a whole curriculum that we haven't been taught about the human condition as it refers to other races besides the whites. And starting with the Indians and their massacre, and the Blacks and what they've been through all this time. I mean, and the Chinese and the Koreans. I mean, it's what do you call it? That's a pandemic too.
It's a pandemic. It's, you watch 13th. It's incredible. Where you're just like, wow, the people on top keep figuring out how to profit off anyone that they've placed in their system as a felon, and it's like usually people of color, they get them on a bogus drug charge. You watch the movie. I don't need to tell you.
I watched the movie, and it was a huge eye-opening. I couldn't believe I wasn't taught a lot of that stuff when I went to school. But, that's the stuff they're ignoring. They don't want people to know what really happens.
They don't want people to know. They want to keep everyone ignorant and divided and conquering. They want.
Well, that's the only way that they can continue their rule is by dividing and by alienating. Because if they unify, it's against everything they stand for.
Well,
and that's very strange.
Yeah, there's a great book called The People's History of the U.S. by Howard Zinn. I don't know if you've ever heard of Zinn. It's an amazing book. I read it like 15 years ago. It's history told from the oppressed people's point of view. And it talks about a lot of these things that 13th talked about and beyond, you know. And there were times actually in our history when poor white people and indigenous people and people of color would be getting along, and the government would send the cavalry in and literally, you know, pre what happened in Tulsa and in Greenwood in that district. Like a lot of people didn't know about the race riots down there.
Right, in Greenwood. That was something I learned about this year too.
I knew about it from reading Zen, but it's like literally the powers that be would not like it when people come together, you know.
Well, they don't want people to vote. Remember,
they don't want people to vote. They want to keep everyone thinking that Black Lives Matter is a terrorist organization.
Yeah, and Antifa and all these imaginary things. You know, we're in the craziest world ever, but we're lucky that there's people like you out there giving us beautiful music to keep us distracted. Your album's on Spotify. I can't remember the name. What's the name again off the top?
Of my new album?
Yes.
It's called Rosewood.
Rosewood.
Based on the marimba bars that I play. And, you know, I think we're going to have to become a better society. You know, the coronavirus has exposed how bad our medical system is for everyone. And unless you're a billionaire or millionaire, you're not going to have good health care.
Yeah. We're in a very sad state right now, and a lot of things have to change.
Yeah,
but
a lot of that we wake up and we have a better tomorrow.
That's gonna be the key. Mike Dillon, thank you so much for coming on 420 Live with us today. And I appreciate you playing also and giving us a little glimpse of some live music. That's always a treat for us here. So thank you.
It's good talking to you, brother.
All right. I look forward to seeing you live somewhere soon. Fun.
All right. Later.
All right. Take care. Mike Dillon, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, he's a smart guy. Thank you, Mike. That was great. Tomorrow we're going to do the Fish fans again, but today the super fans, we're going to concentrate on the Fish chicks. That means the ladies of Fish. So we will be having Jenny Ank on the show, and we will be having Ashley Driscoll and Bethany Baker are our guests tomorrow. So make sure you tune in, because we're going to have a good time for the pre-dinner and a movie. It was a big success last week with the guys. So this week I wanted to give the ladies a chance. Next week, you know, we'll give the fans of color, Fish fans of color, a chance. So please, both of you, reach out to me so I can have you on the show. That was a bad Fish joke. Anyway, everybody out there, I wanted to tell you a couple things. You see it back there? You see it here? And you know what? I'm going to munch a piece. My deliciousness. I'm going to send Mike one of these. The 420 Live CBD bar, the pretzels, the potato chips, the coconut flakes, the raisins, the deliciousness, the mini M&Ms. You see the colors, the mini M&Ms there? The deliciousness in every bite. Reese's peanut butter cups. I don't have to break that ad out. I've been doing chocolate ads for a long time, but if you want to try this delicious Asher's bar, you have to go to their website. You have to order $75 in chocolate. You can send it to a friend. You don't have to eat it all. I'm not trying to make you fat. And you'll get this bar and 20% off. So do the math. So I'm really $60 in chocolate. But this chocolate's so good and creamy. The Asher family, 5 generations of chocolate makers. They know what they're doing. Their first CBD product ever. And one thing we were talking about today, voting, headcount.org. Make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure that you have all the things that you need to have. And I've been drinking my friend's Bart's Holistic CBD, and this stuff is good. It's like lean, but not lean. It's lean, but not lean. I got to put the bar now to do my ending here. But peace, love, happiness to everybody out there. Here's the hug. I want to thank Mike Dillon for coming on today. We got the Fish Chicks tomorrow. Greg from Pigeons Playing Ping Pong. They're on tour right now. They're going to be playing in Philadelphia on Friday night. And Thursday, Dan from PETA. And Friday, Dave from Jambase. We got a busy week for you, and we're going to be here. Might be going up to New York again. There might be a live jam session. We might be streaming live. Who knows? A lot of things in the works. Stay tuned. 420.